Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 12, Text 16, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tasmanaro sangha susangha jata. Jnanasine haiva vivrikna mohaha. Haring tad iha katana shrutabhyam. Labdha smriti yatyati parmadandha advana advana. Translation: simply by associating with exalted devotees, anyone can attain perfection of knowledge, and with the sword of knowledge can cut to pieces the illusory associations within this material world. Through the association of devotees, one can engage in the service of the Lord by hearing and chanting, Shravanam, Kirtanam. Thus, one can revive his dormant Krishna consciousness and, sticking to the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, return home back to Godhead, even in this life. Purport: to become liberated from material bondage, one must give up the association of worldly people and accept the association of devotees. Positive and negative processes are mentioned in this regard. Through the association of devotees, one develops Krishna consciousness, which is dormant within. This Krishna consciousness movement is giving this chance to everyone. We are giving shelter to everyone who is serious about progressing in Krishna consciousness. We arrange for their lodging and board so that they can peacefully cultivate Krishna consciousness and return home back to Godhead, even in this life. Thus end the Bhakti-vedanta purports of the 5th canto, 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Conversation Between Maharaja Rahugana and Jarabharat. Jarabharat, literally dull Bharat, seemingly dull, not actually dull. Not actually dull, but seemingly so, has recounted his previous 2 lives to Maharaj Rahugana. Here we have in this verse the term, smriti labdha, to regain one's memory. So Bharat Maharaj had memory of his 2 previous lives, but the thing that we really want to or need to remember is who we really are, who we actually are. Often people are very interested to find out about their previous life, and they go to some astrologer or whatever to find out how many lives will you go back. And what's the point? Our real life is in the spiritual world with Krishna. So the goal is to go back home, back to Godhead. Bharat Maharaj is here giving the summary of how to do that. There are many perspectives on how to become Krishna conscious, or to revive, to be, as stated here, to revive one's dormant Krishna consciousness. But the summary is here that associating with exalted devotees, gaining knowledge from them, with that knowledge becoming detached from material existence by cultivating the process of hearing and chanting. Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Nam, mp3 Samsara Jinite Ar Kono Boshtu Nai. That's also summarized by Jagadananda Pandit. Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Nam, you can all understand these terms. mp3, I only want this. Samsara Jinite, to conquer over material existence. Ar Kono Boshtu Nai. There's no other. There's nothing else. This is the sum and substance. And of course, within that are also subsumed the important principles of taking shelter of Krishna, Sharanagati, taking shelter of the Guru, by which one is guided, associating with exalted devotees. That includes accepting a Guru, being guided by a Guru. Although, interestingly, Bharat Maharaj, we don't have any record of Bharat Maharaj, Jara Bharat. There's no record here in the Bhagavatam of his associating with exalted devotee. He went away to the forest and lived alone. And Srila Prabhupada comments in one of the purports in that section of his fall down due to attraction to a deer, that because he hadn't taken the guidance of a spiritual master, he got into trouble. So we don't have any record of that, although in the verse previous to this, Bharat Maharaj says that, due to my past sincere service to the Lord. So it suggests that at some point he had that association. That is the process, the general process on which he's stating here. As Srila Prabhupada states in the purport to this verse, the positive and negative processes are mentioned. The positive is one should associate with devotees. Negative is don't associate with non-devotees. Asat sangha tyag evaishnavacha. Asat sangha we generally take to mean the association of non-devotees, demons, rascals, mayavadis, and so on. Bharat Maharaj fell down due to the association of a deer. We don't generally think of a deer as bad association. Watch out for that deer. It'll drag you down into hell, drag you into Maya. The deer, we can't blame the deer. It's only being a deer, that's all. Yes. But the deer was the, to use a fancy word, reification of the dormant desires, material desires within the heart of Bharat Maharaj. Reification means giving concrete form to an abstract concept. So the desires, some desire was in the heart of Bharat Maharaj, the protector, the king is the protector. Ishvara Bhav, that's mentioned in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna mentions as one of the qualities of a kshatriya, is that he has the feeling, I'm the controller here. Of course, he's supposed to do that in a spirit of service to Krishna, but he's the controller, he's in charge. He has that feeling that it's my duty to protect the citizens, even at the cost of my life. And we see that Bharat Maharaj, in his reasoning process, as he fell into Maya, in his reasoning process, he thought to himself that, well, this deer has come to me for protection, and it's my duty to protect this deer, even at the cost of my own self-interest. So this is the Kshatriya mood. There are many examples of this. Ranti Dev was prepared to give his very life just to feed a hawk so that Ranti could protect a pigeon who had taken shelter of him. So that is the mood of a Kshatriya, and it is most laudable for a Kshatriya to have. That is his swadharma, or his material duty. it's more than duty. It's dharma means the essence of one's existence. So the essence of a kshatriya's nature is to give protection, even at the cost of his own life. So Bharat Maharaj had this, but because it was misapplied, it became Maya. It became applied to a deer who anyway he couldn't protect after he died. He died, it seems, shortly after this. And in the meantime, he lost, at least temporarily, his Krishna consciousness or his motivation to fully dedicate himself to Krishna consciousness. So through this we are warned, asatsanga tyag. The asatsanga may take the form of a deer, even. Generally we think of someone who's atheist, mayavadi, gross sense enjoyer. They're very clearly asatsanga, which should be avoided. In the case of the deer, it was more subtle. It's not that Bharat Maharaj went searching for a deer to protect. The deer just came into his life suddenly, in an unprotected state, and presumably any person, unless they're really, of course someone, if they find a newly born deer cub, might take them and wring their throat and eat them. There are people who might do that because they think it's good luck, I got some food easily today. But most people, we hope, would think, all right, let's try to do something to help the deer. Just like if you see someone who's old and incapable and they can't lift some bag to take it into the train or whatever, then you just take it and put it in. But then to get so much involved, that can be the cause of fall down. So asatsanga we can easily identify in many cases. We're talking about a person, particular people who are clearly bad association. In the fight between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, it was very clear that there's one side is this army, the other side is that army. And even though Bhishma, Drona, they were not considered asatsanga, that was Arjuna's whole dilemma. That these are the people that we should be prepared to give our lives to protect, but now we are trying to kill them. So it was that lack of clarity put Arjuna into a dilemma. But generally, it's in many cases like this, it's very clear. There's an enemy who we have to defeat, and that will be our victory. That's what we desire. So in conquering over Maya also, that verse I just quoted, Sangsara Jinite, in overcoming material existence. So that is our aim, as Srila Prabhupada once commented when he was speaking on one of the first verses of Gita. Duryodhana is showing to Drona, here are the armies. Pashaitan Panduputranam. Here are the armies of the Pandavas. So he's pointing out, and Srila Prabhupada commented in this regard, that in fighting, the first thing to do is to take stock of the enemy, to see who is there that we have to fight. What is there to fight? Not that you just go out and start shooting arrows, but in an intelligent person, especially when they're up against a formidable enemy, should familiarize themselves with the enemy and their strengths and their weaknesses and their tactics, the tactics that they generally follow, so that one can prepare to fight them. Fighting, it's not just a physical activity, it's strategy and planning are probably more important than physical strength and physical ability to shoot weapons. Although that's also essential. It's not just planning, but it's not just actual physical fighting also. So in that lecture, Srila Prabhupada spoke, he used this as an analogy to say that we should be aware of Maya and how Maya strikes, and then how we overcome Maya. The basic principle of overcoming Maya is that we take shelter of Krishna. Daivi esha gunamahi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. That's the general principle of how we overcome Maya. But at the same time, we have to understand the form that Maya takes, so that we can be aware of that and not be tricked by Maya, as Bharat Maharaj was. Often when rishis are meditating in the jungle, as we learn from Shastra, Maya comes in the form of a beautiful woman sent by Indra. But in this case, it was not so easily identifiable. Bharat Maharaj could, if there's some Apsara was sent, he could say, okay, all right, I was expecting that. Have a nice day, goodbye. But in the form of the Diya, it was more subtle. It wasn't apparent that this is Maya. He took that this is an opportunity for me to perform some good activity and help a living being in need of my protection. Must be sent by God to help me do some good work. And in this way, he got misled by this subtle form of Maya. Now, Maya, the illusory potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is just that, illusory. So, it may not be so easy to pinpoint exactly what is that. In the case of the form that she takes, in the battle, it's in traditionally fought battles, not like nowadays where it's all mostly fighting is all guerrilla warfare and terrorism and all this kind of thing. You can't catch the opponents. I think it's quite rare nowadays that, if at all, that although there are plenty of military actions going on all over the world, probably as we sit here, it's practically unheard of nowadays that two armies actually line up against each other and fight. It's all trick tactics and all nasty tactics. Adharmic tactics, which couldn't have been imagined even by Duryodhana. As an aside, I speculate, if you like, that one major reason that the Muslim attackers were able to overcome the Indian armies, because the Indian fighters, they couldn't bring themselves to adopt the same kind of, and they couldn't imagine that the kind of tactics that the Muslim armies adopted, like coming up from behind and attacking at night and all this kind of thing, because they fought according to dharma. So, when the enemy is easily identifiable, then one can fight according to the rules. One may identify that this person is bad association, but a lot of the bad association we get comes not exactly in the form of people, but in the form of philosophies or outlooks or worldviews. The one which Srila Prabhupada attacked and identified the most was Mayavad, which takes various forms. Traditional Mayavad is identifiable in the sense that in this Kali Yuga it was codified and propagated by Shankaracharya, and various philosophers following on from him. Of course, prior to that there was Buddha, who had very similar, well, exactly what Buddha said. He didn't say that much actually, but then his followers made all kinds of philosophies. And the same with Shankara, because his various followers made various philosophies to try to explain what they themselves admit is unexplainable, and they take that to be a quality. But actually it's unexplainable because it doesn't make any sense. That's the real reason. But if it's covered in word jugglery, to use that famous phrase of Srila Prabhupada, then it might seem like it's actually something very intelligent. That's another symptom of Kali Yuga, that as Srila Prabhupada sometimes spoke gibberish. You all know what gibberish means? Prabhupada was expert at doing it. I know that. Any good gibberish talkers here? Actually, I saw something really funny, but I'd have to open it up and look at it in my computer. Some really nonsense pseudo-scientific talk. Anyway, I didn't plan on that, so if you remind me at the end, you can all have a good laugh. I'll open up my computer, which is somewhere there if the battery is still alive. And if I can find it. So, philosophies, worldviews, that's our real enemy. It's not just like the deer wasn't the enemy of Bharat Maharaj. His real enemy was himself, or not actually himself, but the worldview that he'd picked up. Shraddhamayo yang purusha. Everyone has a shraddha, a way of looking at the world. Trividha bhavati shraddha dehinang sasra bhavaji satviki rajasaschaiva. Tamasi chaiti mang shrinu. Krishna says that everyone in this world has different kinds of world views, or how they look at the world, how they see the world. There are three basic kinds: those in the mode of goodness, those in the mode of passion, those in the mode of ignorance. So how we see the world, different people see the same things, but they interpret it in different ways according to what they consider to be the purpose of life, what they consider to be right or wrong. This discussion of three worldviews comes up just after the discussion of the two basic outlooks that are in the Gita. This comes up just after the discussion of the divine and demoniac natures, which are two distinct ways of looking at the world. One is according to Shastra, and the other is discarding Shastra. And even within those who adopt Shastra, that's a very important nuance on what Krishna says, that yashastra vidhimutsrija vatate kamakarataha nasa siddhim avatnoti nasukam naparangati. That Krishna says that people who whimsically discard Shastra just to follow their own desires, they can attain neither happiness nor peace nor the ultimate destination. So there are those who purport to take shelter of Shastra, but who actually interpret in their own way and deviate from the purport of Shastra. In this regard, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that Vedna Manaya Bodh Hoy to Nastik, Vedashrita Nastik Yabad Bodha Kayodik. He said that Buddhism is atheism because it rejects the Vedas, but worse than that is to propagate the philosophy of Buddhism under the cover of the Vedas. He was referring to Shankaracharya's Advaitavad or Mayavad. Anyway, there's a clear distinction. Those who follow Shastra, those who don't, then there are those in the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance. And of course Arjuna, he put the very interesting question, what about the people who they don't follow Shastra, but anyway they have faith and they worship something, So obviously this whole question of worldviews, that is the question. The whole Gita, all the Shastras spoken to remold our consciousness to our original consciousness, Krishna consciousness. Preaching means to change people's way of thinking. It's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He framed that as the people's opposite way of thinking, viparita buddhi, opposite outlook, opposite to that which is in their real self-interest, to reform that, to reshape it to what it should be. So if someone's very clearly demoniac, atheistic, impersonalistic, if they have a very clear philosophical understanding, then it becomes relatively easy to identify their strengths and weaknesses and to attack that, because that is preaching. It means major aspect of preaching is it's not only prem pracharan, or preaching about love of God, but also pashanda dalan, or pounding the wrong ideas, or literally it means pounding the pashandas, the non-devotees, the atheists, the inimical. But generally that's understood to mean to attack their wrong and misleading philosophies. So in the case of various well-framed philosophies, that does become fairly easy. Just like fairly easy means there's something that we can, some specific statements that we can take and analyze, just as Srila Prabhupada in analyzing the modern philosophers of the Western world, Shamasun, the Prabhu Hayagriva, they gave quotations from these various philosophers, and Srila Prabhupada would analyze them. Now, I'm going to speak about liberal humanitarianism, which is, according to scholars who analyze such things, is the predominant worldview of the modern world. So that's a big statement, isn't it? If the predominant worldview is not Krishna consciousness, it's liberal humanitarianism. I just came across this yesterday, and I didn't have time to find out what in their estimation is the difference between that and liberal humanism. Presumably there is some difference. I just came across this yesterday, and I found it intriguing, and I thought I would share that in the class today, especially as we're talking about bad association, how it drags us down. We're supposed to come or present oneself before the spiritual master as a blank slate. That, all right, we just, whatever we thought of before, we know it's all wrong, so throw it out. But actually that doesn't happen, because we have so many ideas that we carry with us from life to life, as the air carries aromas. And we find that even Arjuna, although he submitted himself to Krishna as being, now I'm a disciple, I'm confused, I submit myself to you, but again and again Arjuna offered objections to what Krishna said. He was trying to be a disciple, he was a sincere disciple, but things that Krishna said, he couldn't accept them, because Arjuna had his own way of thinking, and we just can't get rid of that very easily. And the worldview is the lens by which we see everything and judge everything. So this liberal humanitarianism is the predominant worldview, and it will be more dominant in the what is called the Western world than it will be in other parts of the world, but it's certainly very influential and tremendously influential here in India, although the ancient culture is also very influential. They don't fit together very well. Now this liberal humanitarianism, it's not so easily identifiable. It's not easy to say, well, there's this one philosopher has this philosophy, and then, okay, let's just deconstruct what he says. There'll be no two people who agree on everything, and that is one of the principles of liberal humanitarianism, that, well, everyone's entitled to their own view, which from the very outset pits it against the Vedic worldview, in which everyone is not entitled to their own view, and as Krishna states, that's actually demoniac to have your own view. We should be guided by Shastra. That Shastra means Krishna's view. So the very idea that everyone should have their own view, we're all, especially those of us from the Western world, and increasingly those in other parts of the world, we're raised with this idea that, well, everyone's entitled to their own outlook, and that's not totally proscribed within the Vedic culture, but it is largely so. The whole idea is to learn, as is stated here. One should take knowledge from exalted devotees. That means knowledge of Shastra. And then one can see, vimudha nanu pashanti jnana chakshusha. Those who have the eye of knowledge, they can see things as they are. Those who don't have the knowledge of Bhagavad-gita, they are vimudha, or big fools, is a literal translation. So we come into Krishna consciousness with various ideas, especially this liberal humanitarianism, the idea everyone is entitled to their own view. One cannot become a disciple if one maintains this way of thinking. Disciple means one who admits, as Arjuna admitted, that I don't know, you please tell me. Some other points of liberal humanitarianism, as I got from a mundane scholar who was a champion of, well, he wasn't even promoting liberal humanitarianism, because he and presumably his audience in America just presumed that this is it. This is the right way of thinking and acting and talking, just as among ourselves here, among devotees or aspiring devotees, we talk with the presumption or the accepted way of thinking among ourselves, the accepted axiom that we have to accept the teachings of Shastra as received through Parampara, and specifically through Srila Prabhupada. So, this is a liberal humanitarian speaking about liberal humanitarianism. The first thing is that it's secular, in the sense that it doesn't ban belief in God, although and again, of course, it's very difficult to pin it down, because there's no one fixed philosophy in all of this. There are those who are not just agnostics and not just atheists, but who are actively, in the words of the now departed and not regretted from our side, Christopher Hitchens, anti-theists. Although they actually think that, as Marx and others said, that theism, or not just theism, but any kind of religion, is harmful to human society. So it is implicitly atheistic in our humanitarianism. Means that we have to see to the good of the human race, and it is considered in terms of the here and now. the word superstition covers the whole gamut of everything that they, in their pomposity, consider to be non-scientific. If we can't measure it, if we can't see it, or if we can't speculate, if it doesn't fit within our speculations, then it's superstition. It's just someone's imagination. So it's implicitly secular, and it judges society and individuals in terms of activities of this world. During a period last year, I watched a few debates between atheists and theists. Watched means through computer or whatever. So, but I stopped after watching a few because it was all the same theme. They're mostly talking about, they weren't talking about the existence of God. They're mostly talking about, is religion good for the world or not, measured in humanitarian terms. If religion helps to feed people and clothe them and give them education and give them democracy, then religion is good. And if not, then it's bad. So even the religionists, while arguing with the atheists, they were arguing on the atheists' own humanitarian grounds. And that they attempted to show that, well, actually religion is good because it does good for people in this world. But the whole essence of religion should be to, first of all, to point out that we don't belong in this world anyway. This world is, our existence in this world is temporary, and our real existence is in the spiritual world. So we can see how much humanism, I'll use that term here, has dominated the worldview of at least people in the West, and increasingly everywhere else in the world, that even religion is defined in terms of what they consider to be human values of the here and now. And therefore people, they faint in ecstasy when they hear the name of Mother Teresa, because she fed people and bandaged lepers and did things to help people in this world, and that's considered most saintly. Here in Bengal also, Vivekananda, he wanted to revive Hinduism. In fact, this whole idea of being a Hindu, this was very much promoted by Vivekananda. Otherwise, previously people, they didn't think so. They didn't identify themselves so much as Hindus. So he to match the, of course we're talking about very complex or nuanced thought systems or philosophies here, but just to put it simply, the Christian missionaries were doing something practically for the people, giving them schools and education and feeding the poor. So the Ramakrishna mission, interesting, they use the term mission, which is also later used by the Gauriya mission. It's clearly an English word taken from the missionaries, the Christian missionaries. They sought to do the same thing, to show that, yes, we Hindus, we're up with it, we're doing things for the people of this world. It's very practical. So it's very much worldly, this worldly, not otherworldly. That term otherworldly is used often as a criticism of religion and religionists, based on the criticism of persons like Freud and Marx, that religion, it's just for keeping people in some kind of illusion of some better future life, so that they don't try to improve their life here and now, which is the real thing. So in this way they say religion it's used to mislead people. You promise them something, you behave, you do what we say here now, and you'll get a reward in the other world. But the atheists, they say, that's cheating. This is the world. This is it. Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya kim punaragamano bhavet. Atheism wasn't invented in the West. The idea that, well, we're here now, when the body gets burned, it's all finished. So enjoy yourself now. Enjoy now. There's no opportunity later. So this liberal humanitarianism, which in many ways seems to be very good. It talks about give everyone equal opportunity. Everyone should have the opportunity to live a good life and have luxuries and good facilities for living. Everyone should be equal. No one should hate each other. We should all treat each other very nicely. There should be no racism, sexism, casteism. We can all live together very happily in this world. And it vigorously, well, in some cases, vigorously opposes any thought of the afterlife or life beyond this body, which means it promotes science. The idea is that there's the idea of progress. We're making progress. Things are getting better by our own intelligence. We are making the world better. In this way, everything is getting better and better for human society due to science. It has a commitment to science as being the way to improve life. So clearly, it doesn't fit with Krishna consciousness. I mean, you could try to put the two together, but if we see the basic philosophical underpinnings, although some things may seem to be very good, and they may not be totally bad also, the idea that, well, equal opportunity, everyone equal, don't mistreat anyone, they may seem to be very good, but the philosophical roots, there are severe differences with the Krishna conscious outlook. And even this idea of everyone being equal, not only is it not practicable, it can't be instituted in human society, but it's also not the best system, according to Krishna, who says, Chatur Varnyam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha, that there should be stratification in society according to quality and qualification, which is actually a much more practical system, rather than trying to make everyone artificially the same. Rather, to recognize the differences and to train people and guide people according to the nature they have acquired under the modes of nature. So, other points about liberal humanitarianism. I didn't look here. I'll just read this. Liberal humanitarianism involves a considerable degree of tolerance and cosmopolitanism, as well as a sense that other people and cultures offer opportunities for learning. So it tries not to be ethnocentric, that we are the best people in the world, but it tries to see that others have things to offer also. But there's a problem with that also. Although it sounds very all right, so it's good to be tolerant of others and their outlooks, but there's a problem with that also, because it reinforces the idea that there is no absolute standard of knowledge, and it's this progressive idea that gradually we're learning and we can learn from different sources and different cultures and gradually make a better world. It comes down to asatyam apratishtamte, the outlook of the demons, that there is no actual ultimate goal, and we can learn from everyone and take a little bit from here and a little bit from there and make the world very nice. Interestingly, this professor gave us the first symptom of liberal humanitarianism, a commitment to, can you believe it, consumerism. The most important thing we should do is earn money and spend it on things we don't need. Consumerism specifically means to want, and to, even better, more than want, is to buy things we don't need. Everyone in this world is a consumer, but the spiritual outlook is yavad artha prayojanam, accept what you need, that's all. We need a little food, we need a little shelter, little play. That should be minimized. That Shukadeva Goswami gives the idea, if you want to be a renunciant, then you don't need a pillow, you've got your arm, you don't need a bed, you can lie on the ground, you don't need to buy Bisleri water, you can take it from streams. This was 2,000 years ago, I don't recommend it nowadays. Don't recommend Bisleri water either. What can you do? You have to drink something. You have to buy it. But apart from the basic necessities, we have a desire for more and more things, and it even becomes necessary in modern life. Just like a watch, you need to have a watch. You don't have to have a $20,000 watch, you need something that can tell you the time. But in consumer society, we are encouraged to buy the fanciest and the latest watch, even if the watch we have is already... Nowadays people don't have watches, do they? They have the cell phone, which has everything else. You can't live without it. Everything's there. Your whole life is there in the cell phone. So we need gadgets, and we don't just need a small house, we need a big house, and we don't just need one set or two sets of clothes, we need all kinds of different kinds of shoes and all kinds of things. Buy. It's the first symbol of liberal humanitarianism. Because the idea is, according to this gentleman, the idea is that, well, life is meant to be lived happily. And happy, of course, very few of them will actually state all this in these terms, but the underlying understanding is that we should live life as happily as possible because we only live once. So enjoy while you can, but as long as you don't disturb others. Let them in. Everyone should just tolerate everyone and let everyone enjoy themselves to the best possible extent. Of course, this philosophy coming from the Western countries, they don't usually think that all their electronic gadgets which they are enjoying come from sweatshops in China, that people are being exploited so they can have, or their chocolate which is being produced by literally slave labor in Africa. They tend to forget that. But the idea is that we should enjoy now, and enjoyment means, happiness means gadgets, shoes, big houses, and everything else. Consumerism. It's amazing how the demoniac Vaishyas have tricked people into all this way of thinking. So that the goal of life is to earn money and spend money. And that's it. It's not Rinang kritva gritam pibet. It's not so simple. Just get some ghee and take ghee, but it became much more complex. George Bush, the first one, was it? When the Twin Towers came toppling down, to his great astonishment, because they could have never imagined that anyone would have ever flown a passenger airplane into the Twin Towers. So his advice to the American people, so that they could get out of their traumatic condition, was go shopping. That was one of the things he had, go shopping, and then you can just enjoy yourself and forget all this. Interesting. So, consumerism, a cultural system in which people gain part of their satisfaction and part of their personal and group identities from the process of consuming goods that they do not necessarily need. It's all part of the liberal humanitarian tendency to emphasize the goal of the individual. You have to live your life to the fullest, as we learned from one ISKCON leader teaching us that the Bhagavad-gita teaches us you should be all that you can be, which, if not explained in terms of Krishna consciousness, which it wasn't, gives the idea that, well, we're just here to make a success of ourselves and live life to the fullest. Enjoy yourself while you can. So this liberal humanitarianism, according to even those who are proponents of it, is the most influential cultural trajectory at the present time, which suggests that we are all influenced by it. And that will influence our devotees' attitudes toward culture in general. We may think, what's all this Indian culture? Krishna doesn't wear a dhoti. He probably wears anything else except a dhoti. For instance, what's all this? Why do you insist on this Indian culture? God is for everyone. The idea that any culture is as good as any other is part of the liberal humanitarian outlook, whereas the Vedic culture, Vaishnav culture, is that which is specifically meant for going home back to Godhead. Attitudes towards education. Srila Prabhupada was, lest we forget, quite radical in this regard. He said, there's no need for everyone to go to school. He discouraged, although part of the liberal humanitarian outlook is that everyone should go to school. All the children should go to school. Give them all an equal opportunity to get brainwashed by our propaganda and make them into a good consumer. They should all go to school, but as Srila Prabhupada pointed out, if you're going to be farming in a field, then you don't need all this going to school. Of course, if you're farming in the modern age, it's so complex that you have to have a degree. As one devotee from Slovenia, I met him in India and I asked him about his background. He said, well, his parents are farmers, and I asked him what he's doing. I said, well, he's getting a degree in agriculture. I said, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do farming like your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents? Well, now we're part of the European Union. You're not allowed to be a farmer unless you have a degree. Because you've got to learn how to use all those pesticides and genetically modified crops and all these things. So Srila Prabhupada's attitude to education was very different to that of the modern liberal humanitarian society. But as we see within our society today, I'm not here specifically to attack anything, but I'm just pointing out that within our society, I'm talking about ISKCON today, we don't promote Gurukul education as Srila Prabhupada wanted it, but we do promote education, the goal of which is to integrate the future adults into a consumeristic, liberal humanitarian society. And for that purpose, the goals of the liberal humanitarian society have to be instilled into the children, although we try to put some Krishna consciousness together with that. Gender roles, liberal humanitarian the liberal humanitarian outlook promotes that the history of the human race, of course, different philosophers have seen this in different ways. Karl Marx saw it as a history of class struggle. Feminists see it as a history of male domination of females, which we have to overturn by women's equality and more than equality. Attitudes towards homosexuality, that's a liberal humanitarian society's outlook says, well, if it doesn't do anyone any harm, then what's wrong with it? Although, according to Shastra, as we understood from Srila Prabhupada, that any sexual act that is not specifically for the procreation of children is sinful. Just going through these very quickly. Epistemology and hermeneutics, how we understand the world and how we understand Shastra. That will also be influenced by this liberal humanitarian outlook. The Shastric outlook is to accept what Shastra states as being gospel truth. But the human-centric outlook, anthropocentric outlook, is that, well, we judge everything by our intelligence, and if what we find in Shastra, we like it, and it fits with our ideas of justice and equality and humanism, then we can accept it. If not, well, we have to adjust it. So we accept Shastra, but we have to tweak it as required. Attitude toward India, that dirty, overpopulated, smelly place where people they didn't really understand what it means to be a human being. Although Shastra states very clearly that this is the best place for God realization. Individual rights is very much that's central to the liberal humanitarian outlook, although in Vedic society one's role is defined as servant of the servant of the servant. That's not only the Vaishnava outlook, but that is the Vedic social outlook, that we are not individuals seeking our individual promotion, sense gratification, but that we have duty to perform to the others around us. That is our prime outlook. Okay, so I'll finish there. I'm over time. Obviously, much more could be said about all these points, but I just wanted to point out that in bad association also includes various ideas about the world which we have imbibed, and we may still even unconsciously subscribe to, but which actually is very harmful to our individual and group cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Any yes, please, questions? Just please pass over the mic there.
I didn't quite understand. You said liberal humanitarianism is secular. Does that mean they believe in God, or they're allowed to believe in God?
What does it mean by saying secular? When I said liberal humanitarianism is secular. Secular means, let me define it as best I can, according to my understanding. In this sense, it means that it doesn't insist on a belief in God, and it doesn't derive from a belief in God or from scriptural authority. It can tolerate people believing in God. The more liberal humanitarianists may tolerate people believing in God, but others will not tolerate it because they find that it's harmful to human society. So it's agnostic. Agnostic and that's the whole outlook is agnostic, not only in relation to belief or non-belief in God, but the whole approach to knowledge is that, well, we can't really know anything fully. There is no such thing as absolute knowledge because there are different perspectives, and we're always finding out new things. So we can never fully, properly understand anything. There's no absolute knowledge. The whole approach to knowledge is agnostic. We're always in a state of uncertainty. There's a question which is not particularly related with this class, from Mayapur TV online. How should be the life of brahmachari in general? Well, the answer is, please, from my side is, please read one book which I compiled called Brahmachari and Krishna Consciousness. Any questions related to the class? Yes, please.
One of the artifacts that I personally experienced, having grown up in a predominantly liberal humanitarianist society, in myself, is not allowing myself to feel happy in Krishna consciousness. Because I've seen time and time again that happy people are easily cheated. They've got the wool pulled over their eyes by more clever people. And so when I cling to this sense of not letting myself be happy so that I can be on the lookout in case somebody's about to cheat me.
That sounds very intelligent.
Is it intelligent?
But we shouldn't be over-intelligent. We have to put our faith somewhere. Otherwise we can't go anywhere. At some point in this life or a future life, we have to put our faith in Krishna and his representatives. But we should never, it's a fact that we, as Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport, that there are two kinds of happy people, the fools and the self-realized. Foolish people are happy in sense gratification. Of course, that's not happy. That's the happiness of the pig eating stool. There's no intrinsic difference between the happiness of a worldly sense enjoyer and that of a pig eating stool. And those who are in between, who have realized that this stool eating happiness is not actually happiness, they're trying to be self-realized, they're struggling. So ignorance is bliss, but that kind of bliss soon turns into poison, as Krishna points out in Bhagavad-gita. So yes, we should not suspend our powers of discrimination, but we have to put our faith somewhere. We have to come to the point of accepting that I'm incapable, I'm ignorant, I'm tossed in the waves of Maya. I have to take shelter of Krishna. So that requires faith. That is considered foolish by those who have the agnostic outlook of this worldly outlook. But that is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. To submit oneself to Krishna via the parampara system requires faith. It should not be blind faith. Yeah, some other hands were shooting up here and there.
It appears sometimes yogis are impatient. At least it appears.
Yeah. If you don't mind me interrupting, which I often do, you're not supposed to do that, but anyway. This very term, which I also often use, it appears. That in itself is a contribution from the liberal humanitarian outlook. That we don't like to state anything very clearly. Of course, that may be also an expression of our humility, or an expression that we don't claim to have understood everything. But at least we see in Srila Prabhupada, he didn't use this expression much. He would state, it is like this. Okay, please continue.
I wanted to ask, because many times we get an answer is under the pretext of Humanitarian Prakarya. By whatever means is to attract people to Krishna consciousness.
By whatever means we should bring people to Krishna consciousness.
Where we should draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? The line should be drawn somewhere, isn't it? We don't want for the butchers to inaugurate a Krishna conscious slaughterhouse, for instance. Why don't we open a slaughterhouse and then all the butchers will come and then we can preach to them? So, where do we draw the line? The answer to that has to be subjective. And the answer will be seen in what comes after that. We bring people in, but we have to see that we have to bring them up also. I've discussed this in some detail in another book called On Speaking Strongly in Srila Prabhupada's Service. If you want, you can read that, where it's stated that for bringing people to Krishna consciousness, we can do anything, but theoretically, but at some point we have to tell them the truth. This is reality, this is illusion. This should be done, this should not be done. So we see that the general policy of our acharyas, and certainly Srila Prabhupada, was to not hide the truth or cover the truth or try to represent it in a manner that it appeared to be not truth, because if you do that, then at some point you have to change your message. And people may not like that. In one country, in Europe, one devotee, one disciple of mine told me that some devotees there had started some bridge preaching project. I don't know what it was, whether it was yoga or kung fu or whatever. And then after about 2 years, they realized, they revealed to the participants that actually we're devotees of Krishna, at which point someone said, "What? We're not interested in this, you cheated us. You're just trying to give us this Krishna consciousness." So if at all we are to present indirectly, which then we should be very expert in bringing people to the actual point. Although generally, this is my opinion, it's not required, because we can present Krishna consciousness straightforwardly, and we can't expect that thousands of people will come, but some people will come. If we present indirectly, then maybe many people will come, and as we gradually introduce Krishna consciousness, we expect some to fall away, and then gradually there'll be a few people left. If you preach Krishna consciousness straightforwardly from the beginning, only a few people will come. So you end up with the same anyway, without having to go all round and about. Yeah.
Sometimes when a senior devotee speaks very strongly, many people walk away from the class and say that they won't disagree or agree, but they might say, well, that's his mood. The mood here is a little different. The mood in this temple is different. So my question is, where does mood come from? My answer to that is, let us try to understand the mood of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is obviously a pure devotee of Krishna, and his mood, he's not a monolithic personality. But definitely his general mood was one of urgency in presenting Krishna consciousness and strong.
This is all discussed in detail in a book called On Speaking Strongly in Krishna Consciousness, compiled by Bhakti Vikasa Swami. If you want to know more, it's all examined there. And often devotees ask me, well, what about this and what about that? What if you're not qualified? It's all discussed in there, in some detail. If you can think of any other objections, please let me know and I'll put it in the next edition. Okay, someone had to say that. It's a standard formality. Okay, it's a nice one.
Regarding you were saying that Maya is tricking us.
Saying that what? Sorry, I couldn't catch what you said.
Maya is tricking Maya can trick a devotee and it can fall trap for Maya's plan. So you're supposed to take shelter of Krishna. But sometimes we feel that we enact Krishna consciousness by the fear of Maya. Sometimes it becomes Maya-centric. It becomes, try to do Krishna consciousness just because to avoid Maya. Something happens like that.
Yeah. That's the beginning, isn't it? The beginning of the entry into Krishna consciousness from the conditioned state is to understand that I am in illusion. This is antithetical to my real self-interest. I'm suffering here. I have to get out of this. That's the beginning. The topmost stage is where we're simply absorbed in love of Krishna. But the beginning is to understand that I'm in a very bad position and I have to get out of this. So fear of Maya is healthy. To not fear Maya is a very dangerous position. Then we're already in Maya. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.